When you look at how the Joker handles himself in this film, instead of say like if we talk say Mark Hamill's one in the animated series, he would just be like, "Look, I just want $2.5 billion and I will kill Batman, I will kill Gordon, and I will fire them out of a cannon." Then you've got Heath Ledger's Joker. He's much more like what you'd probably expect a modern threat, like where he's like, if I don't have Harvey Dent and if I don't have Batman reveal who his identity is, I'm going to blow up a hospital. He's willing to blow up hospitals, kill innocents, and even turn Harvey Dent essentially to the Batman equivalent of the dark side. He doesn't want money. He just wants to throw a bit of chaos in the mix and then just sit back with a drink in his hand, just thinking, oh, time for the next.
Stand back. It's bullet time. Howdy True Believers, and welcome to another episode of Bullet Time Bites, where we break down the greatest moments and movements in nerd culture. I'm your host with the most and your forever guardian, Dynamo, and alongside me is my co-host Alex, and today we're venturing into Gotham City in part 1 of our Batman deep dive to explore Nolan's Dark Knight trilogy. But we're not doing that alone, as we have the return of Joe, Mr. Puff here. And we have a new addition to our team, the anarchist himself, Michael Storm. So thank you for joining us on this podcast, Michael.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited. Looking forward to it.
Yeah, it should be a very exciting one. So the Dark Knight trilogy was a cinematic phenomenon that redefined not just Batman, but the entire superhero genre. So, the reason we're here is because something fascinating is happening in Batman discourse. Over 15 years after The Dark Knight's release, and 12 years since The Dark Knight Rises concluded the trilogy, fans are reassessing Nolan's work with fresh and sometimes critical eyes. The trilogy grossed over $2.4 billion worldwide, with The Dark Knight sitting at number 3 on IMDb's top 250. But recent retrospectives are raising uncomfortable questions. Did Nolan's realism actually limit Batman? Is the trilogy overrated? And has time exposed cracks in what we once considered cinematic perfection? Well, today's mission, if we dare to take it, understanding how the Dark Knight trilogy shaped Batman's cinematic legacy, examining its place in the broader history of Batman adaptations, and debating whether it still holds up, or if we've simply outgrown Nolan's vision of the Caped Crusader. To answer the question of today's topic, let's travel back in time to 1939 when everything started. So, Alex, before we dissect Nolan's trilogy, we need to understand Batman's DNA. So let's go back to the beginning, Detective Comics in 1939.
Alright, there's a lot to take in for Batman when he first came out, at least for the understanding that I got from him. It's a bit hard for me to put in words the right way of going about this, but Batman's definitely a bit different. Well, a bit different. He's actually a lot different from how he first started, at least how his stories were also done, to how we see him nowadays. One of the main things that sticks out to me the most, obviously going from, say, comics and the stylization at the time to, let's say, nowadays with both film, media, and video games as well, the aesthetic is very drastically different. One main thing to stick out from it is the colour scheme typically for Batman. It was a bit brighter and it also looked a bit more simplistic, like your ordinary just guy in a fabric costume. Whereas nowadays, when you look at Batman, you're kind of thinking of this tech billionaire actually using his money to create these amazing gadgets and these amazing suits that utilize the best kinds of quality material and metal in order to build up this absolutely indestructible man who dons the Bat persona in order to become Batman. There's a lot of things to look at regarding how Batman has changed over time regarding that, but I think the number one thing to take away when you compare Batman then to Batman now is that back then he was basically just a guy in a costume who was going around foiling your typical bad guy of the week, whereas nowadays when you think of Batman and what he does as a superhero, he's actually taking on much larger, much more dangerous threats, not your stereotypical villain of the week or just some random guy on the street that caused you a bit of problems. He's taking on full-on what we would probably even consider major political or even terrorist kind of threats. You know, the kind of thing that would actually put a lot of people's lives in danger rather than just for the sake of one person's own individual gains.
Yeah, it's very interesting the way Batman's evolution has come about and how we went from early Batman, where we had some ruthless vigilante who frequently killed or even maimed criminals, and evolved into the hero we know today with the strict no-killing moral code. And then, well, we've had like the campy and colourful Batman, and we've had different types of Batmans. And it's a very far cry. What we had back then is a very far cry from the hero we know today. Michael, how do you think this evolution affects how we judge different adaptations?
Batman's so different now, and he's changed not that long ago, really, because now he's even classified as a metahuman. He's not a human anymore. You mentioned that he's taking on bigger threats. He's actually classified as a metahuman now, and I guess there's some debate about that, whether he's still just Batman or if he really is this, I guess he dates back to the beginning of time and this Bat cult or whatever. I didn't read a lot of the Tiny End stuff, but I think that's where a lot of it comes out of. And I know there was a Suicide Squad issue as well, and Amanda Waller and them, and that crew officially recognize him as being a metahuman. So he's obviously changed and from that sense, because that original appearance, he's just a detective. He just happens to want to instill fear into people, and that's why he uses the costume. So it's quite a bit of change.
Oh yeah, definitely quite a huge change from back then. And I think even like the settings and backdrops and everything that surrounds that universe itself has changed a lot over time, with even like the undertones and whatnot. Like, it's very different now, and what they can set up now to what they could get away with back then.
I like the city and the backgrounds and things. One of the things that's been fairly consistent about Batman, I think, is that there's almost a timeless feel to it, regardless of the actual sort of real feel, whether it's that sort of 40s noir, late 30s, 40s noir detective thing. Sorry, let me get a drink of my drink over here. Or whether it's something else, one of these later periods. Obviously, the perfect example of that is the Michael Keaton Batman, the late 80s, early 90s Batman, and that aesthetic around there, that gothic aesthetic. But still, it was obvious that it wasn't the sort of. It's not the 40s,
Different times.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that era of, well, if we look around the 90s era, we had like what Tim Burton was doing and what Tim Burton changed around the 90s. So, Joe and Michael, let's get you guys talking about the 1989 Batman phenomenon. We had the Burton era legacy, we had the Michael Keaton stuff, we had the animated series. So, what do you guys think they got right around that time? What do you think really allowed Batman to change from that from the stuff they did during that era. So
Yeah,
So
you know, I don't have a problem with any of the Batmans. The only Batman that I find to be particularly weird is this sort of Adam West '60s psychedelic, that sort of Bat. That's the only one that I find particularly weird, but it's still entirely enjoyable, 100% enjoyable. And that's the most important thing for me in terms of is it believable? You know, can I look at it and go, yeah, that's the Batman character. That's the detective. That's the crime fighter.
Yeah.
Can I buy that situation? And I think the Keaton movies did that really well. I think they drifted off a little bit, maybe as they went a little bit further in them and changed directors and things like that. But and some of them just weren't treated as well. You know, some of those characters could have been really great that they used, but they just didn't treat them real well.
No.
And you know, how do you blow up using Jim Carrey as the Riddler? You know.
Yeah, that was an interesting idea that they went there, especially with what he was known for during that time.
Absolutely. As for TAS, I was still the definitive. Although this new one, I don't know if you've seen the new. I don't know which one it's on. Is it on Prime?
Yeah, the new one.
I think. Yeah. Yeah, it's really good. There was some controversy about the gender swap on the Penguin, but I thought the fact that she was a mother made her so much more of a vile, you know, sort of totally gangster. I mean, you can't get any more gangster than sort of drowning your own son accidentally. Oops, you know.
Yeah, it's amazing with what they actually pushed there and didn't just try to like hide behind stuff as many adaptations try to do today. They won't really try to go outside the bubble much. Well, Joe, what's your views on that Tim Burton era and the animated series, and what we touched on here?
well, for me, the 1989 Batman was the first real good superhero film. I like the fact because before that point, when everyone thought Batman, it was just Adam West, which was very kiddie, cheesy, camp, over the top. You know,
True.
which unfortunately they went back to after the Tim Burton era with Batman Forever and Batman and Robin.
Yeah.
It's but with the Michael Keaton era, it just felt a little bit more believable, particularly the first one. Particularly like, for example, the Joker. Jack Nicholson's Joker seemed a lot more, you know, I felt a lot more scarier than other Jokers like Caesar Romero when he did it, or Jared Leto, who to me just looked like high school kid on a bad day.
Yeah.
But at least Jack Nicholson's Joker felt, like I said, a bit more terrifying because it felt believable. I feel like, you know, you could get that type of guy out there. And then it went with then after that, Batman Returns, the Penguin. Okay, certain elements a bit very comic-y, particularly the whole Penguin side of it, but I like the fact it went like a dark backstory. You can understand why he became what he became, and I think the darker era makes it more exciting, makes it more like you can't wait to see what happens next. And you know, if the third, I still think Tim Burton should have done Batman Forever. Tim Burton doing Batman Forever with the Riddler, that'd have been a lot more interesting than what we got with Jim Carrey, which is just, it's like imagining Sheldon Cooper become playing the Riddler. It reminded me of.
Yeah, I guess that's one way of looking at it.
It was, I don't know what they were thinking, to be honest, when Jim Carrey's Riddler. Just don't look at him, you think bad guy. Whereas Jack Nicholson, we know he can play a good villain.
Yeah. Cool.
Then I think I'm going to be honest.
Yeah.
If you put Christian Bale to one side, I would say Michael Keaton's the best Batman.
Yeah, it
I
might
would say that.
really added something iconic.
Yeah, I feel like he was more than he didn't feel like a billionaire, egotistical billionaire playboy. He was more like quiet, humble, mysterious.
Mhm.
So, which
Yeah,
I think kind of gives off Batman vibes.
yeah, I agree with that. I think Christian Bale himself said that Michael Keaton added the most credibility to Batman because of Burton's approach. However, Nolan's trilogy is often called the definitive Batman. So, Joe, can they both be right? Can Michael Keaton be the most credible, yet Nolan be the definitive Batman?
Well, it's like whilst for Christian Bale Batman's the best Batmans, I feel like Michael Keaton's the ones that set the tone. But I feel like they were basing the. I think they've done that trilogy. I think they were building off what Michael Keaton did more, and then using that for Dark Knight. I think after the disasters of Batman Forever and Batman and Robin, they need to go back to something darker, something the fans are going to get more excited by, and that's why I feel like in a way they built on that. For example, certain scenes,
Yeah.
they kind of, if you compare them to each other, quite similar. Look at when the Joker, for instance, when he's saying "hit me,"
Yeah.
when he's on the car, Batman going towards him. Play that alongside when the Joker's saying, "Come on, you gruesome son of a bitch, hit me," when he's flying down the sky. Play them side by side. That's why I think you looked at that and based your films on those films.
Yeah.
And I've got to say, in terms of the music as well, they add to it.
Yeah.
Whilst the Dark Knight trilogy felt like it was more exciting music, it's more you get into it.
Yeah.
Whereas, but there's something about Michael Keaton's Batman's music, it just feels nostalgic.
Yeah.
I was going to say, I don't know if it oversimplifies it or not, but I think the Keaton Batman experience is more like a comic book character, whereas the Nolan Batman experience is more like you're supposed to believe this could actually happen. That this guy, this guy could be crazy terrorist trying to blow up the bridges and poison the water and do all the things that the Joker does, and that there's this crazy rich guy out there that has a whole bunch of money and thinks he can try to stop him. I think I think it's supposed to be more believable, whereas I think that Keaton Batman in that whole era is much more of a comic book movie.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? As opposed to an action movie. There you go.
Yeah.
Sorry, I think there's one thing that we should at least take from this so far, at least, spanning from the Adam West and the Michael Keaton era, or the Tim Burton-esque era for Batman, is that Adam West, aside from obviously the early serials of Batman, where he looked, very floppy and then just very goblin-like, with the pronounced nose mask and that. But if we go by at least the Adam West stuff, it was campy because I think it based too much of its style based on, like, if you were looking at the comics and they were actually to come to life, it's like a really rough translation. But the Keaton stuff, at least with the darker tones and that, and the more disturbing visuals for, like, having someone as credible as Jack Nicholson play the Joker, that cemented Batman at least as the true pivot point for how he should be for the future. Because when you think about every other little thing that came out at least around the time of or before the Dark Knight trilogy, like even say like the early Lego Batman the video game, for example, it had so much inspired from obviously that era of Batman, but it also still maintained some of the goofy kind of things that both worked and didn't work with those lots of Batman as well. And that's kind of what cemented the first iteration that I guess we could say the modern Batman era was based on, because it gives you the idea that he's not really colourful, he's dark, he's daunting. The people that he's dealing with, they're not just some thug or whatever, they're actual criminal masterminds.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's just something like that to keep in mind. They're not just your villain of the week. They are literally people that deserve to be locked up. Not just someone processed by the police, someone that needs to be locked away for both their and our safety. And that's kind of what you need to kind of, I guess, take away from the Keaton stuff. Because even if the films themselves weren't that great overall, it actually gave the characters so much more basis than anything that came from the Adam West stuff as well, because Batman didn't just have the automatic answer on his belt anymore. He literally had to become a strategist. He had to think about how he was going about dealing with these things, and in most cases, it would often lead to people getting hurt, which is typically Batman style. Like, he won't kill you, but he will probably break a few bones to stop you from doing something. And that's just the anti-hero-esque image we now have for Batman, essentially, or at least that's the foundation of where it came from. At least to me, it is.
Yeah,
That's reasonable.
Yeah, along that
For
view,
me, it was
100%.
more the for me, it was the whole. Here's the analogy I'm going to use. You know, Christian Bale Batman's obviously they're like the best. Everyone says these are the best ones. The analogy I'm going to use is Christian Bale Batman's. It's like the Messi. They're the best ones.
Yeah.
But Michael Keaton one's like the Maradona. That's who he based it off.
Yeah, two different icons, two different generations, but both adding something unique in that Batman overall phenomenon.
Well, there's one thing to consider, just to mention the Burton Keaton thing again, and how it's the crossover point, as you kind of made that point here, Alex. You have that darker, grittier character, that background. You question the sanity. He even says, let's get nuts. He's telling you that he's crazy and he's ready to go at it in his own subtle way. But one of the greatest scenes is the attack on the parade. And you get something like the Batwing going up, and you see it in the moon. And then, of course, as he's coming down, he fires all of these whistles, and all these weapons, and all these machines. All this stuff goes off. He doesn't hit anything. It blows up a couple of balloons and stuff like that. It hits a couple of the parade things and sends a few guys flying. And, of course, Joker's standing right there saying, come and get me. And he pulls out this ridiculously long pistol and fires it off in one shot and brings the plane down. And the next thing you know, he's making the pistol shorter and shorter. And, I mean, it's such a perfect comic book thing to do without totally turning into sort of 60s camp.
Yeah, I really love that, and that's the way I feel like I want my. If I'm watching a movie about something from a comic book universe, I want to see it like that. Too much realism, I feel, can really limit what you can get away with.
Or he should be able to, anyway.
Yeah, true.
Yeah, I mean, when you think of the characters as well, like, especially if it's like the Joker doing it, the Joker's not really the most serious person. He's serious when he says he's going to hurt someone, but his methods of doing things, whilst he does want to achieve something in the end, at least for the most part, or at least he wants to make a point, his whole gimmick, he's literally the clown prince of crime. He's literally the guy who would have a shock button on his hand to electrocute someone literally to the bone just to make himself laugh and just to prove a point. Like, you can't just have him be that, at least, like, you can't just tone him down so much to be that realistic that, he's no longer the Joker. Like, that would be nothing. And I think when we have to at least think of that interpretation, at least, that's at least something that's been really well received, because when you look at a lot of people, when they consider who's your favourite Joker, what's your favourite iteration of Joker across all Batman media, a lot of people will still say, even against other great ones like Heath Ledger, whether you still technically can consider Joaquin Phoenix as Joker, or let's face it, the odd few will probably still say Jared Leto, but you have to consider Jack Nicholson was, at least his interpretation of the Joker and how they actually did it. They actually pulled off something that in most cases would usually have been a bit of a flop around that time for a character. They probably would have done so little to bring him to life in such a very their campy of way and very exciting to watch that it would have probably just killed a franchise. But look at it, it spawned a timeline that had 4 films.
Oh yeah,
that's actually pretty decent considering the time these films also came out, and I think that's definitely a praise to take from it, both from the original one with Keaton all the way through to Batman and Robin. And they did it. They did something truly amazing in that time. Even if some of the films weren't as great as they could have been, they did something truly amazing when they actually restructured Batman for that modern period of the day.
Yeah, very different times. Producers wouldn't give much thoughts to comic book movies, and you didn't really get much comic book movies coming out, especially from that same universe. Except probably, I think, like you said, Michael, Superman.
That's it. That's
Yeah.
really it. There's other things that you can point to, absolutely, before the Keaton Batman comes along that are comic book movies, but they weren't standard setting
No.
by any means.
Definitely not. But yeah, this changed everything. And even though it did change a lot, we did nearly lose Batman after Joel Schumacher's weird vision with Batman and Robin and how he nearly killed off the franchise.
Yeah.
But then we had Christopher Nolan and Christian Bale arriving in. But Michael, I noticed a reaction from you there. So what's your thoughts on
Yeah,
that?
no, I just don't know how close it was ever to not being a thing. I think Batman's too easy to do. You know, it's not like Superman. Superman's such a different character, and he's so weird in and of himself because he starts out as something less than what he is today, which is, I guess Batman's the same way in a lot of sense, but it's still at the core of Batman, aside from our sort of geek knowledge of the fact that Batman's a metahuman now. You know, most people just think of Batman as a millionaire who has some money to spend on some gadgets and wants to fight crime. And then there are some people that want to analyze him for, you know, is he just as crazy as the people that he's fighting, that sort of thing.
Yeah, there are lots of different visions.
I am one of those people. I'm sorry.
No.
But Michael, what would you say made the Dark Knight trilogy different from that stuff? Then, like, what do you think how do you feel Nolan's approach with what he did and the realism he tried to incorporate into his vision?
What was the Nolan? What now? Rephrase it again.
With the realism, the real life aspect he tried to incorporate into his vision, like how instead of Ra's al Ghul being the immortal demon that he is in the comics, he instead made Ra's al Ghul a mortal man, or how he made Bane rely on I think it's called analgesic gas, not too sure how to pronounce that one, instead of the Venom strength serum that he's known for in the comics. So he tried to make it real and stuff.
So I didn't know Ra's al Ghul until they did Begins. I really didn't know the character very well. It was one of the ones that I just have not followed along in the storylines, and so I wasn't disappointed in the character. My biggest problem with Begins was just the pace. The pace was just excruciaing. It was so slow. It was the beginning, and it was like, will you ever just kind of get to somewhere? And so that was my only real problem with that. And part of the thing that I try to do, and I know this sounds, I don't know, take it for what it is. Yeah. I don't set up any expectations. I never did. And I don't to this day. I just don't. I don't waste time going out and looking to see what other people are talking about, what's happening in with this storyline or with this movie that's coming out. I don't care. I don't want to know. I just want to go to the thing or turn it on the stream, whatever it is, and be entertained by it. I want to escape for a few minutes and not have to think about whether or not I like this or I don't, or whether it's somebody else's opinion or not. It just, I stay away from the spoilers. I stay away from the opinion of other people. And even when I do know something, here's a really good example would be the Marvel, the MCU, and it being built on the Avengers and ultimately ending in the Infinity Gauntlet storyline, which the Infinity Gauntlet storyline I read when it was brand new as it was coming out. And I read all the little bits and pieces around it as well, and I know that those movies were really not anything like that original Infinity Gauntlet storyline. There's the heart of it is there, but death is gone. There's a number of things that are missing, and other things that are inserted that don't belong there, and so forth. But whatever. But that's one of the ones that I'm just on the edge with going into it, I already know this story, but I still was completely entertained by these other things, and I can't do it. I can't put the expectation out there. It's just not going to be my character. There's 85 years of Batman. to look
Yeah,
at.
true.
And somebody somewhere is going to make a story about him, and it'll either be a Batman, I believe, or it'll just be another Batman story that, you know, maybe I will or won't like.
Yeah, 100. Yeah, I agree with that, and I think it's very interesting that the way you approach these movies. Because I think it's very hard for people to do, especially in this day and age. You know, with technology and social media everywhere. The minute you open your phone, you're like notifications of, oh, Superman did this, Batman did this. You're like seeing like a million different things on your phone.
Yeah.
It's like it's very hard to stay away from spoilers or expectations, because even if you say, okay, I'm not going to set expectations, all of a sudden you're seeing people's expectations. You're like, and you start thinking along the same lines they're thinking of, and then you go into a movie and it's kind of different from. What
I don't
people are
want.
saying.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you how it happened. It happened to me as a kid. I remember we were getting ready. It was a Friday night. I couldn't have been but 12, something like that. And we were getting ready to go see The Dark Crystal. It had just dropped in theaters, and Siskel and Ebert were on before we were leaving the house, and they were bad mouthing this movie. As they do. And I don't remember the details. I just remember that they ultimately didn't. Well, the big one, whichever one he didn't like it so much. The skinny one, it was okay for him, but it was just something that stuck in my head. Thinking, wow, I just went. Of course, I'm a kid.
Yeah.
I went and I just saw this amazing thing with these puppets, and I grew up with with the Muppets on TV, and I see Kermit the Frog with his little poles, and you can still see him moving around, and so you see these amazing things on the screen, and they put all this effort into them to make them just sort of realistic and believable and at least enjoyable. And I really enjoyed it, and I had a good time, and I thought it was a fun story, and I was into the adventure, and still to this day enjoy it. I didn't find any particular flaw with the story or anything going back and watching it. And so I think that just stuck with me over the years, is that other people's opinions about that stuff, it's not going to matter. It's not going to make any difference.
Yeah, that is very true. And I really applaud you for that one, and setting it and keeping away from expectations. I really admire that. But let's get back to the topic at hand.
Yeah, right.
Alex, what's your thoughts on Nolan's approach and what he did differently and so on?
All right. First thing I want to at least think about for it is when we consider the time that this film came out as well, like Batman Begins all the way through to The Dark Knight Rises. One thing we have to remember is that I think the time when it first came out, we were actually doing really well with CGI as well. So I feel like those kind of things and the scene builds as well to really bring the modernization of Gotham City to life. I feel like that's definitely contributed a lot to it, because it took the dark grittiness that we had originally with Michael Keaton and that timeline of Batman, and in this new timeline of Batman, without the technology we had at the time to make the films like that, I do not think we would have succeeded, at least having these kind of films put out with this amount of detail and like everything that we got out of it. So I will say the way that the films were actually able to be made in the first place is actually in lieu of how really well done all this stuff was when you think about films nowadays.
Yeah.
So much love and care had been put in to make sure all these things were completely right, especially the time span between all the films, consider it started in 2005 and ended in 2012. So 3 films over that amount of time with the great detail it had in it to really set the scene and get everything done right. I think that's one thing to keep in mind of how really well grounded and well presented it was. But the main thing for me is, at least for the grounded realism of the Dark Knight trilogy, is it tried to be something different, but also it kind of set a new standard for Batman. It didn't just make him the ordinary billionaire that we know. It just shows like how someone with this money can actually create all these gadgets and all these kind of tech and just strategies. He's got all this stuff built and all set up, and he just shows like what a militarized kind of Batman would be, because he wasn't just one man. He had obviously Lucius Fox helping out, which a lot of Batman media will definitely show now, especially in the games, but it just kind of shows that Batman isn't just, a superhero now. He's kind of like a one-man army with his support and everything. Like, you don't just have the Batmobile, you have the Tumbler. You have literally Batman in, like, fully armored suit. Not like a mech suit or anything, but he's fully armored. He's got these amazing stylized Batarangs and gadgets and everything. Just the whole look and style of it. It just almost feels like it's something that in our time would have been completely impossible, and yet we managed to get this super variety of Batman, like, where he becomes a proper staple icon. Like, you see this stuff turning up, you know it's Batman. I think that's just one thing to think of compared to the other, because whilst we did get things like the Batwing and that, it just seems like Nolan took more of a realistic approach, that this is how this stuff would look, where all the vehicles looked a bit more modern, but they also looked so futuristic as well. Like, this is the kind of stuff only someone with money would be able to make, especially with how well-funded, well-organised and everything was as well.
Yeah, I really love the focus of Christopher Nolan's practical effects and what he utilized and how he used Bruce Wayne's like psychology and like what the money approach and whatnot to really set up this universe.
Yeah, it's not just that though, but it also reflects in the characters as well, because one of the points I brought up before, especially regarding the Joker with Jack Nicholson, is that it was a really great adaptation of the character where they actually kept some of the cartooniness that is the Joker himself, but they also made him more realistic. Like, you see him on screen, you don't just think he's just like some random cartoon character in a serious film. You can actually take him as a real threat. You can take him as a genuine anarchist. And I feel like all the villains, and I will stick to my guns with this, even if some characters were and weren't done all the justice they should have had in the Dark Knight trilogy, I feel like a lot of the characters were really well presented and or updated with the more grounded takes for them. Like, whether we go with Christian Bale as Batman, he's not a big bulky behemoth like how you think Batman is, like when you think of, say, Ben Affleck as Batman, because he's actually quite short. And I do see some people saying their main issues with that Batman is he's very skinny, lightweight looking, he's very short, he's not, big and intimidating. He makes up for the fact that his fighting skills, like he trained with Ra's al Ghul, or Race, just, depending how you want to say his name, and the League of Assassins. He actually trained as a ninja, which is kind of built in, I guess, also to why he chose to don the Batman outfit the way he did. But other characters like the Joker, where he became a proper anarchist, like the kind of person that actually has an idea of a societal revolution, but also took other characters that, when you think they'd just be a bit of a costume freak, like in the animated series, like the Scarecrow, I actually thought they did really well with the Scarecrow in the Dark Knight trilogy, and personally, I would have wanted to see more of him, because in the end, Dr. Jonathan Crane is a doctor who divulges into fear and even creates a gas that forces people to experience their worst fear, and that's why he becomes such a prominent threat. And when you see like the impact it's had on both these characters and the different way you can interpret them, where they're not just like a gimmicky character, they're like a more realistic one that we could face in the modern day, you see how well it translates to other media, like the Arkham series, when you see about how terrifying these were in films and how they went a stretch further with what's to come. It just shows that there's so much potential, and even if it's not comic accurate, you can actually make a really decent film with a really decent budget and create some amazing variants that makes you think this belongs to this timeline of Batman, and even for its flaws, if any, it's amazing. I love it, and I recognize this as my favorite iteration of that character, and that's something that, like all other variants of Batman has ever had throughout his time. It just goes to show that it's definitely left its mark and stapled it in people's minds, where they think the Dark Knight trilogy was probably one of the best of Batman's media.
Yes.
At least, just for me, at least.
Yeah, and I think going on the point you mentioned about Scarecrow and the way Christopher Nolan sort of allowed the character to actually build and develop and use like the fear gas to really focus on Bruce Wayne's trauma and psychology, and even like showed growth in the trauma and psychology over the three movies. Like, it really brought something unique and significant that not many other movies that that would do Batman like the 90s era stuff. They didn't really touch on much of the trauma and psychology as Nolan did, and I think it's really that kind of way he went around it is really interesting.
One more thing I do want to point out, and it is something I mentioned to you like last week as well. In like the early comics for Batman, Batman actually did kill a few people. Like this was before his whole, Batman does not kill kind of thing. Where even if he did directly cause someone to die, like by say launching someone or causing something to happen that would, by most people's accounts, mean he did technically murder someone or he accidentally caused the events that would lead to someone's death. You do see it repeated in Batman media, like when we look at how the Joker with Jack Nicholson died. Some people could probably say that, Batman was actually trying to stop the Joker and, some poor setup of events just led to the Joker's death when he got dragged down by the gargoyle. But you could kind of also say that Batman, in one way or another, was technically killing the Joker. But I think at least what we can get with Batman Begins, I think the line was something like, I'm not going to kill you, but I don't have to save you. Technically, Batman does not kill, and this is one of those points where you can say, is Batman as crazy as the people he's fighting, or what's like the weird hypocrisies of Batman? Is that it kind of just builds on that media again, like, does Batman actually kill? Does he not kill? Like, there's some people you can't save in the end of the day in Batman, and that's an unfortunate thing in every superhero story. But I feel like for a normal person like Batman, where these kind of consequences could happen to anyone, it just seems like Batman does still have these flaws still haunting him, where even if he's trying to justify saying he doesn't kill, he does in some way or another have this grey area still around him, where even if his way of getting things done does leave some people scratching their heads, it still leaves it open to say that, Batman does seem like he is, in one way or another as well, still carrying this characteristic for him since his comic book era, where it's like he still is technically, in some way or another, killing someone. Even if you could make the argument that doing this, that, or the other, but not, actually being the one who ends their life, is not technically killing as it is suppressing the threat, And I think that's something, at least, that even if it's not 100% on show in the Dark Knight trilogy or any other Batman media, it's like a grey cloud that kind of haunts him throughout any interpretation he's in, that in some way or another Batman does kind of contribute to some kind of harm, especially to the people he's stopping, where it can even lead to people dying. And I feel like that's just something that is so sublime but is still present even in modern media like that.
Yeah, and I think it is an interesting evolution of where we came from, through like what we just mentioned earlier, and the whole Batman killing thing, and now coming into this era, and it's gone from, like you said, it's gone from killing to this just great cloud of, but there still kind of is like a death there, murder, harm. I think it's very interesting how the evolution of that Batman and killing and all the rules behind it has kind of evolved over time. But Joe, what are your thoughts on what we've mentioned here, and do you have anything else to add?
Yeah, well, I agree with a lot of what Alex is saying. I like the realism behind the old Dark Knight trilogy. It felt like certain villains, like you can imagine these type of people out there, particularly Scarecrow.
Yeah.
I like the fact that instead of just being a silly, cheesy, unrealistic comic book character that I think many were expecting,
Yeah.
it made it seem believable. Like he's got a hidden agenda, and he could be someone just, you could slip in and out of society without being detected. Someone in a well-respected position, working in the legal profession. I really liked how they kind of built it up as it went on. Michael Manchurian, he thought it was too slow. Batman Begins, but I liked the fact that he slowly, instead of just rushing into it, but slowly built it up. He explained really how he became Batman. Batman Begins is more about showing how he became what he is, and kind of setting the scene for Dark Knight, which ultimately was the big one. And then Dark Knight Rises just more concluding it. kind of loose ends. Yeah, so I love what they did with that, and I love the whole story. I love the storytelling behind it as well. The way it wasn't just instead of like other Batman films I've seen, like just jumping from action scene to action scene. This one, it felt like there was an explanation behind everything that was happening, and it was more. It's more about mind games rather than physical ability, particularly with Dark Knight where he's fighting the Joker.
Yeah.
I mean, remember that scene in the police cell where he's beating the Joker up? Physically, Batman's got the advantage.
Yeah.
When you hear Joker laughing, going, "You've got nothing to threaten me with." In the end, it was ultimately about mind games, and that department, particularly Dark Knight. That was the one time where he felt Batman was he was the one who was powerless. And I like that they did that,
Yeah, it's a very interesting take they took there and allowed things to breathe and slow down. But I've seen some recent retrospectives argue that Nolan's realism mistook tone for depth, that the gritty atmosphere made us think the films were deeper than they actually were. So, Joe, based on what you were saying then, do you think that this is a fair criticism that the people are saying, or would you say it's a cynical revisionism?
More cynical revisionism. I thought the films were great. The only one which I feel like stepped away from, what it should have been was Dark Knight Rises. That's the only one. While I still think it was a good film, I felt like there were elements where it kind of moved away from the plot a bit. Certain things could have been explained a bit better. But other than that, I like the fact, they took it, they made it deeper, they explained everything a lot more. And I like the fact, the only thing I would say though, with certain films like The Dark Knight, would it have got anywhere near as much praise as it did if anyone other than Heath Ledger was playing Joker? That's the only.
True.
Even if it's the exact same script, would it have got the same amount of praise?
Well, this actually comes into my next part now that I want to look at, that I was going to address the elephant in the back cave to say that, because as I mentioned earlier, The Dark Knight is ranked number 3 on IMDb's top 250. So it's rated above films like Schindler's List and 12 Angry Men, and these like all-time films. So I'm wondering, is it actually that good or something else going on? Because like you mentioned there, with Heath Ledger's Joker being transformative and tragic, but also kind of what happened with Heath Ledger, like, is it as great, or is it just taken because of everything that's gone on behind it?
I don't think it's to do with everything that's gone on behind it, what happened to him. I think the film would have been highly rated regardless of what happened to Heath Ledger afterwards. Because his performance, for me, the greatest acting performance I've ever seen in cinema history, and his version of Joker was the greatest villain I've ever seen. I like the fact, remember certain scenes where they kind of improvised as well, went away from the script, like particularly when he's clapping in the cell or he grabs Rachel by the face.
True.
And then, but, if there was anybody else playing the Joker, would it have done as well? That's the thing. I think it's still been a good film, but I don't think it had been classed as one of the greatest of all time. The reason why it's got as highly as it did was because of Heath Ledger. Like, he made Batman seem... He's meant to be the villain, Batman meant to be the hero, but he made Batman seem like a side character.
Interesting. Yeah, because the Joker was a big point of The Dark Knight, and they did have a lot of focus on the Joker doing that, but I don't know if he made Batman look like a side character. I'm not too sure about that.
Like, Joker seemed like the main character. He was...
I mean, he was the main villain, yes, but I don't think that they really pushed Batman to the side there. Like,
I feel
there's
like
a lot of focus on Batman.
I feel like there was more.
Bruce Wayne's,
You heard the saying, what do
journey.
people love more than a great hero? It's an amazing villain.
True.
And I think Heath Ledger defined that. And like I said earlier about the Dark Knight trilogy,
Yeah.
it's like a three-course meal. Batman Begins starter, it warms you up. Dark Knight's the main event, that was the big one.
Yeah.
Dark Knight Rises just ties everything off.
That is true. But I do still wonder though if Dark Knight would still be ranked number 3 on IMDb if Heath Ledger lived. Like, I know what you mentioned there, that it is still an amazing film, but number 3 itself on like top 250.
I think it's my favourite film of all time. But would it? It's my favourite film of all time, but would I still view it that way if it had someone different playing him? Say, for instance, trying to think, I don't know, you know, for example, I don't know the actor's name, but the guy who plays Henry Creel in Stranger Things.
I don't
know if you've seen it, Michael.
Which was it?
Have you seen Stranger Things?
Yeah, no, I've never watched any of the Stranger Things stuff. I grew up in the '80s. They weren't that interesting.
Yeah.
I wanted to just comment on just a couple of things. One, Scarecrow. My God, why wasn't that the third story?
Yeah.
Instead of breaking Batman's back, but whatever, or at least get him in there. He just should have been in there. They just built him up, you know, a little bit in the movies before, and they just didn't go anywhere with him, unfortunately. At least they did in the Arkham games. Those were great. The Scarecrow in the game.
Yeah, definitely. They made Scarecrow cooking that, especially for the fact that the only real things where he turns up in Arkham City, aside from his mask being like a riddle that you can find. You can find a few hidden Easter eggs here and there, like on the bat signal thing, where you can end up getting those Morse code messages things, where it's like every number is a letter of the alphabet. You know, they made him cook. They actually turned him into something much more terrifying than he already was. So, yeah, seeing what the Arkham games could do. Imagine what if they did something like that with him in the Dark Knight trilogy, and that came out before, obviously, like Arkham Knight. Just imagine that kind of Scarecrow in the film. Like, that would be truly diabolical.
Yeah, it would have been great. The other thing was about the Joker being the main character, being more important than the Batman character. I think that's by design. I think it's true. I think that's why you see it that way. The movie starts out with them setting up that character, and then the entire movie is trying to figure out who is this character, what is he going to do next. We're not figuring out Batman. We don't care. We already know. We already know Harvey Dent is Two-Face. We already know that at some point he's going to get his face messed up. Half his face is going to be, you know. We don't need to know any of that. What we want to know is, what's this crazy guy going to do? How's he going to pull it off? Is he going to make Batman kill him? Is he going to do, you know, how did he start? Did his dad really stick a knife in his mouth and put, you know? I hadn't thought about it before, but now that I think about it, looking back at it, yeah, he's definitely the lead character in that story. And without him and without Ledger, I don't know that it's the same movie. I don't think it's as important. I think it falls down to the level of the other two, which, you know, because it's like this for sure. You know, with Dark Knight up there, you know.
Yeah, but for me it was more like, I feel like he made I think in the story though, I think Batman made a great point saying, like, criminals aren't complicated, you just need to know what they want. But, you know, Heath Ledger's Joker was just more, he was that one exception. You're like, what does he want?
Yeah.
He just wants...
Well, that's it. That's the story.
Chaos.
That's Batman. He's a detective, right? He's supposed to figure out what the bad guy is doing. He's supposed to solve the riddle. He's supposed to solve the story. Just to jump back just a bit and take a little bit of umbrage with referring to the Joker as an anarchist. He's not an anarchist. He's an agent of chaos. There's a big difference.
One good thing that worked with that as well is when you look at how the Joker handles himself in this film, instead of saying, like, if we talk, say, Mark Hamill's one in the animated series, he would just be like, look, I just want $2.5 billion and I will kill Batman, I will kill Gordon, and I will fire them out of a cannon. It's fine, it's cartoony, but, he's there. But then you've got Heath Ledger's Joker. He's much more like what you'd probably expect a modern threat, like, where he's like, if I don't have Harvey Dent, and if I don't have Batman reveal who his identity is, I'm going to blow up a hospital. Like, he's not asking for money. He literally could not give a crap about money, because that's who he is. He just wants people to essentially just see the corruption in society. He just wants to see society fall apart. He wants basically like a massive social revolution in the worst way possible. He's willing to blow up hospitals, kill innocents, and even turn Harvey Dent essentially to the Batman equivalent of the dark side, just to make a point. He doesn't want money. He just wants to throw a bit of chaos in the mix and then just sit back with a drink in his hand, just thinking, oh, time for the next. I think that's just really good with it. Oh yeah, definitely. It was a plan that literally could not fail. Either way, what happens, he still technically wins.
Yeah,
as soon as Harvey fell, that was basically it. He basically won just as soon as Harvey Dent fell. That was it. He'd already got checkmate. He was just screwing around with the rest of the chessboard after that.
But I think that what it succeeded in here was, importantly, is the lasting cultural impact that this trilogy had on the superhero movies, and it kind of influenced a decade of films that followed, because after that every film tried to be this gritty, edgy thing that the trilogy was. But not everyone can be edgy, not everyone can be gritty, and we did kind of get a weird phase with the movies during the 2010s.
I feel like there's I feel like the last Dark Knight trilogy, particularly the Dark Knight, that raised the bar, which you've got to be. I don't think any superhero movies beat that yet. No, I don't think they ever will beat it. There's only two films that you could argue came close, and it was Infinity War and Endgame. They're the only two that came close to Dark Knight, but I still think Dark Knight takes it.
Sorry, I was going to say I have my own opinions, but I know it will be controversial in terms of, like, how you will say if the film's good or not. But in terms of the emotional side of it, I'll say, I personally loved Andrew Garfield's duology as Spider-Man, and even if the films have their own issues, and they do, like, especially with introducing characters, but I feel like it does really well with introducing a much more dramatic and, like, upset and emotional kind of tone, like especially trying to save Gwen Stacy and the whole scene that happens there. It kind of does give a bit of Batman vibes, like we're trying to save Rachel and then he realizes I've come to the wrong place, I've saved Harvey by accident, and it basically leading to nothing, because even though he was saved, it caused so much sadness, so much damage, so much death, even if it was just for one person. You can see it replicating this. It's just the difference being that The Dark Knight is Batman with this gritty and well-developed relation with everyone involved and how that scene plays out. But then you've also got the romantic side with Spider-Man and Gwen, and with what happens there, it's also quite sad too. But the difference being that film builds up the happiness and then just drops it immediately into, like, major depression, whereas The Dark Knight's like constant unease and agony, just where every single scene that follows on top of that, you never get like a breather where you're thinking everything's all right. It's like society could drop at a button press, and you don't really see that in the same kind of films that try to repeat it. But while some do have that kind of success, I don't think any other superhero film does it as well as The Dark Knight, where it's always a constant presence, where there's not even like one moment of brief happiness or relief. It's always, just tense. You don't get one moment where you can think that everything's all right, because in the end it isn't. The entire tone of the film, and even The Dark Knight Rises, there's not one moment where you think that everything will be all right. It's always up in the ante in the next scene, and then the bar's higher and everyone's more terrified. And I think that's how these films manage to make themselves so, well, so well set for Batman, because that's just what Gotham is. It's not a place of happiness. It's a place where everyone is constantly under threat in one way or another, or suffering. And
Yeah,
that's why there's so many different villains like this, like whether they're tragic, whether they're actually evil. There's just so much going on that every single person is basically likely to fall to the dark side.
Yeah.
And that's what we see in the end with the Joker's plan. It's just, even though he was defeated, and even though Two-Face was, well, killed, sadly, and obviously that put a damper of Harvey, the White Knight of Gotham, now being put to sleep, and him being essentially a martyr, it doesn't really give a happy ending in the end. It just basically says that we need a new symbol, and the only symbol we have is the Dark Knight, the person who, as far as everyone's aware, killed Harvey Dent.
True. And I think with you mentioning how Gotham like always at unease, I remember reading a while back that there was some like curse in Gotham that made people go crazy or turn bad, and had Gotham always on edge. I don't remember the exact details, but I do remember it was something to do with a curse or other.
There is something like that. I think
be
Arkham
any
Asylum
number of
actually had like a bit of a hidden lore.
Yeah, it could be any number of storylines from the comic books, the Court of Owls, the thing from Tiny Inn where it goes back to the beginning of time, and there's this bat cult or whatever. Yeah. No,
I think it's just, in the end, Gotham is always just doomed to be the place of misery.
Cursed over and over again, just because of the people. The people, even Bruce Wayne's father, you don't even know if he was a good guy or not. You know, there's so many various sort of stories about him as a kingpin of industry and invest. His corporation, every time you turn around, is investing in creating mutants or something like that.
Yeah,
Yeah, the Telltale games did something like that. They showed a really good King Ring-looking foundation going on with Thomas Wayne, Carmine Falcone, and Mayor Hill, even showing the Cobbleparts, oddly enough, as a very tragic story, when we all know that the Cobbleparts, or at least Oswald Cobblepart, just completely deplorable. And yet they still somehow, in at least that game story there, they actually showed something like that, and it just goes to show that it doesn't matter who you are, you're probably always tied in one way or another to some sort of dark underdoing. And unfortunately, Batman and Bruce Wayne, by that extent, is stuck in it. It's just like he's trying to prove he's not, but the fact is, even Batman's caught up in this too.
Yeah, very true. And he is very different to other heroes, like with his darkness and the way he approaches his problem solving to crime fighting is quite different from like the campy stuff we get from Superman. So yeah, I guess we can also say that he's caught in whatever's going on in Gotham. But after we had the Dark Knight, and let's get back to our bigger hand, that we had the Dark Knight Rises that followed after it, which made over $1 billion worldwide, but had aged, according to some critics, incredibly poorly. So we have like people debating on like the ending of like what worked, with like Tom Hardy's, people saying Tom Hardy's Bane was probably one of the most memorable bits of it, but then there's a lot of stuff that didn't age well, like the Robin Blake stuff. I think with the whole, they're trying to set up a Robin but not actually developing it properly. It was very weird ending that they went with it. And there are definitely quite a few number of problems throughout The Dark Knight Rises. So, Alex, let's get your thoughts on what do you think made The Dark Knight Rises work, and what do you think didn't work, and what's your feelings overall?
All right. The first thing is, for me, firstly, it's Bane, the character. It's going to be controversial, especially depending on, who hears it and how well they agree with my decision for it. But I've always loved Bane as a character, especially, the Titan injections where he turns into such a behemoth monster where any lack thereof of empathy in his heart just instantly gets snapped out and turns into animalistic rage and murder. I actually really love this adaptation of Bane, but I can understand why people also have their issues with it. For the first thing, I just love the new take on Bane, because I always do love when people kind of give out their own interpretations of a character. Like, you know, you're not just copying everyone else's homework, you're actually trying to make it your own, you know. It's like we're all drawing our own picture of what we want the characters to be, and I thought it was really well done, at least for what we got for it, for the fact there was so much mystery that we still don't know who Bane is, just like in his stories, how most of the time Bane is just his alias, and we only know like the small snippets of his actual story. We see him as a bit of a tragic character, obviously, in the backstory, where he actually assisted Talia when she was a little girl, but we don't know much more about that besides him. But one thing that I do like about it is that they actually tried to do what's actually very hard with Bane, because I've seen a few people online sometimes when I look at videos saying that Bane is a very a very bland and generic character. Like, his main goal is to break the bat. Yeah. And yes, he breaks the bat. He literally breaks Batman's back. Not just in the comics, but in the film as well. But the difference is, for at least why this is no different than anything else, than anything, you know, to try and make him interesting, is that it's kind of hard to build a character around that one thing, because if you don't have any actual idea as to who Bane is or what Bane is, he's just like big muscle who just wants to cause harm. You can't really build much out of that, because there's no real story there. So whilst I actually think it was a great idea to try and reshape Bane to give him an actual story, or to try and give him some kind of identity that's not just there for you, like they did with the Joker, for example, where it's all up in the air. You've kind of got to look at the devil in the details rather than just read what's in front of you. I actually think it was handled really well, but in the end, I can understand why people will also have the issues with it, because in the end, he just wants, aside from the continual downfall and social revolution in Gotham, he still basically just wanted to break the bat, where you just take Titan out of it, just make him a very strong, buff mercenary, but it makes it seem much more genuine, just that he's not just some scientific experiment. He's just some guy who just wants to hurt him, just to show him how feeble he is, just to show him that even though he's still alive, he's on the brink of death and his body just doesn't realize it yet. So there is that, but I would also say the ending as well that you brought up before, like we spoke of before this thing happened. I actually do like the ending, because it's kind of like a good conclusion to the Batman story, in that it's not just, you know, Batman will always be in Gotham, he will always be there to keep you safe. It's more that Batman's time is over. Bruce Wayne can actually live on now, whether people think he's alive, whether people think he's dead. He can essentially retire from the crime fighting. He can actually live a safe and secure life. He can actually continue the Wayne legacy in at least one way or another, even if it's under like an alias kind of one, just, you know, depending whether or not he's actually alive or if what we saw was a hallucination. But it seems like his time as the vigilante of Gotham comes to an end, and it hints that instead of Robin taking over as Batman, it's more like saying that discovering the Batcave and seeing this is where Batman's operation was, it's like indirectly passing the torch to him to say, my time in the shadows is over. It's your time now to protect Gotham, because it will need a savior from the shadows. And whilst I don't really think it would have worked as Robin, it would have worked probably better for a character like Azrael. But with the tone and setting of the film already, I don't think, at least with any further developments or changes, I don't think fitting Azrael into this film would have been a good idea to begin with, considering how complex that character is already. But I think it was a great interpretation for the ending, that Batman's time's over, or if you want to believe Bruce is still alive, he's still out there, but he's just, you know, living a normal life. He's not dying like his father and his mum. He's actually living a safe and secure life, just like anyone else would want for him, and that it can actually move on to a new hero to defend Gotham from future threats, that it's always going to be like this, but we need more people like Batman. And I feel like it's a great way that it's not just handed down to the next generation, it's handed down to the next person who feels like they can take up the mantle. That's just at least what I take from it, because that's why it just ends abruptly. It doesn't end with him like actually gearing up. It ends to your own interpretation as to what would happen next. And I'd like to think of it as this is the new Batman, or even if it weren't Batman, the new vigilante for Gotham, whether it's Robin, whether it is Batman, or whether it's someone completely different. It's just the next step for that version of Gotham, and that's why we don't need anything else from it. Batman stories at an end, and as far as we can tell, there's not really much need to delve into this timeline anymore. It's like the perfect cut and dry end where we know that the story can be continued by your own interpretation.
I mean, well, I do agree with some points there, and quite valid, like especially like with how I think they should have had Robin be Azrael. But like you said, they would have overcrowded it with an abundance of characters, so it's best they didn't even touch Azrael, as I feel like they would have probably messed it up with not developing it properly. But I don't like the idea of that just anyone can take on Batman's mantle, as Batman himself had to go through an arduous journey to become Batman. So that the fact that just anyone could become it, I feel like takes away from what Batman actually is. But Michael, what's your thoughts on what Alex mentioned here and on the Dark Knight Rises and the journey of Dark Knight Rises, and especially the ending?
Taken as a trilogy, it's a complete, perfect little story for Batman. There's really just not much more or less about it than that. It's, you have a building up. You learn the Batman story. You learn who he is. You learn that he comes up against these crazy sort of supernatural villains, and he finds ways through technology and intelligence and friendship and all these other things to defeat these things, but it doesn't always come out as great as it could be, and people are hurt. And all of it happening, it happens that people are hurt, and that's just part of the outcome of it. And you see at the end the hope. Yeah. I don't know about an individual. I think it's definitely very open to interpretation about what happens next, but you get the impression that everybody is supposed to sort of step up now. And he showed us the way. He showed the city the way, and showed them how to sacrifice, and showed them a little bit of a path to take, and now they have to make the right choices themselves to make it a better place, to make it a better city, and a better world for them going forward. Yeah, I think it definitely leaves you with a sense of hope about the future of Gotham and the people that are in it, and not all the stories leave them that way. That's for sure. Because that's one of the great things about Gotham and about all the different places and all the time that has transpired, and the different characters and people and things that are created in these spaces, that they all have a life of their own. Yeah. And so it's all about the city. It's all about everything else and everyone else. It's not a Batman story, it's the Gotham story. It's the people of Gotham story. Batman's just one of the great stories in it.
That is quite true. And while there is many stories happening in Gotham, and everyone feels like they have their own piece, I definitely feel like there are some bits, especially within the movie itself, that should have been developed properly. I think especially like the Robin Blake bit, that was a bit of a mess.
I personally would have loved to have seen Azrael. I really loved that storyline during the whole Nightfall thing and the whole Night Quest thing. I loved that storyline, reading it as I was, I guess, in college at the time, and it was building the Bane character and building the Azrael character it was great times. It was fun. Yeah. But I think you had to do one or the other. I don't think you could do both. I don't think you had enough time. You'd had to do a fourth movie to do it, and you would have had to have left Batman's back broken. You would have had to go to another story and then come back and wrap it up. It'd have been like a two-parter inside a trilogy.
Yeah, true.
Fourth part of the trilogy.
That is very true. But Joe, do you have any takes on what's mentioned here?
I think, like Alex and Michael said, it was basically it's running off everything well. It's kind of him passing on the mantle. It's more that everyone's. I think it's more everyone's got to step up, but then Blake slash Robin's going to be the ultimate. Take not necessarily becoming Batman, but he's going to take on the role as the next hero.
Yeah.
And as for what Alex said about Bane, first of all, I thought Tom Hardy did a great job at Bane. I thought he's better. The only time I'd seen Bane before Dark Knight Rises was in that Lego Batman game, the first one that came out, and the Batman and Robin film, where he's just kind of a side character. He's just kind of the support acts for much bigger villains. But whereas I like the fact he got his own movie that actually seems to have a bit of personality, whereas I won't say personality, it's more there's a bit about him, whereas in the Batman Robin movie, I don't think he even spoke.
No.
But I like that. It's like the fact, he can actually pose a huge threat. He's blowing up Gotham City, and I like the fact he found out his intention behind it. He's doing the work of Ra's al Ghul. I like the fact they're continuing with that story, the whole Ra's al Ghul. The only thing I would have done differently is the whole thing with Robin. I think they could have built that in a bit sooner, and then maybe had a scene where he's actually fighting. Instead of just being police officer, actually being like the Robin we know. There's no point just dropping it at the end and us not seeing him in the Robin outfit. And also, I think to tie them together, you've done Joker. The next movie, is Bane the right choice? Would it have been better if it had been one of the bigger villains like Penguin or the Riddler? Or if Heath Ledger had sadly passed away, I do believe they'd have done in Dark Knight Rises, instead of Bane, they'd have done it the Joker.
Well, he actually was supposed to be in The Dark Knight Rises. He was actually supposed to be the judge, but they replaced him obviously with Jonathan Crane because Heath Ledger had passed away. But I feel like if they would have done anything with that, it would have been built on the whole "we're going to be doing this forever" kind of thing. But I don't think it would have been the main focus of the film.
No.
I think, but
I think it was
we'll
better.
never unfortunately know what that film would have been like now because obviously with Heath's passing. But if anything, that just should make us just appreciate the Joker more for what we got from him. We got him for one film, we got everything we need from him. We didn't need another, Joker part in the next film, but, it's one of those to ponder, like, how would that have gone if the Joker was still around? But then again, we wouldn't have had any more of the Scarecrow, and I actually enjoyed the Scarecrow. A lot of other people enjoyed the Scarecrow, so maybe just having that small little tie-in there, even if it was underwhelming, maybe that was all worth it in the end.
Yeah, I don't think when you mentioned you'd have had him doing the court scene, would they really have had a character as big as the Joker just being the judge in a court, or would have had him sort of doing something a lot bigger? Like, you can't bring a Joker into him and have him be the main villain.
Yeah, it would have been much different, the court scene, though. Joker would not have just been sat at a desk basically saying guilty or exiled or whatever. I feel like he would have done something similar, like with those three mob bosses, the three goons for the first time, the whole, how I got these scars, and then, the whole, we only have one slot available and just force them to essentially fight to the death. I'm imagining something like in Arkham City, like with the Penguin recruits. He probably would have just had like a free-for-all kind of thing just to instill into people's heads, this is what we're doing, this is what we're building to. But again, it's kind of hard to say how this film would have been if Heath Ledger was still alive, but it could be argued that The Dark Knight Rises would have been completely different than how it actually turned out. But who knows? Maybe in one of the many different universes of our own, maybe there is one where Heath Ledger survived. Obviously, he didn't die tragically, and we actually got a completely different version of The Dark Knight Rises. Imagine how that would have looked.
Yeah.
Do you think Bane was the right villain, though? Would you, if you were the director, would you have still gone with Bane, or would you have chose the Riddler or Penguin?
I think Bane, honestly, is like a very peculiar choice, because again, you're basically going for someone who's essentially just like a big, tough, strong henchman, like someone who's not really had much going for them in the actual comics, aside from, I want to break the Bat, I want to break him mentally, then I will break him physically. he's very one note. So I think the fact that they chose Bane out of so many other big headliners, I think it was a risky opportunity, and I think honestly it paid off at least in most cases. I'd say it paid off great.
Works, but would it be
Yeah.
an even better film with a different villain? That's what I'm wondering.
It depends. I
could
mean,
be.
you could have had like Lady Shiva. You could have even had
Yeah,
someone
that'd be
like
more interesting.
Deathstroke. You could have had anyone like that. I mean, those kinds of characters would have fit in probably a bit better with the whole Ra's al Ghul League of Assassins kind of backstory, backdrop thing that's always going on, at least in Batman Begins and somewhat in the other two films. So,
Yeah.
you've got your picks really, but I feel like the fact that they chose Bane is like taking a very big gamble for a big opportunity
Yeah,
because you're
true.
actually trying to develop the character. And while some people would obviously say that they didn't really do much with Bane, when you see that games like Batman Origins, for example, Batman Arkham Origins, you actually see Bane become so much more that some people have actually labeled that the most interesting Bane has ever been.
Yeah, true.
When you think about at least how he is in this film, it's something to say they took a risk, and whether it paid off or not, they actually did something. They didn't just default to what the people want to see. They took a risk and gave us something new, something that you probably wouldn't have expected.
Yeah, that's true, and it is interesting what they did with Bane. But I really would have loved to have seen Deathstroke. We've not got an actual movie live version of Deathstroke, and I mean, I feel like we've only in like live action terms, like in series, I think we've only got Deathstroke twice in Titans and in Arrow, both different approaches. But I would have loved to have seen a film version of Deathstroke and see what they could build over the course of a film with Deathstroke. That would have been very interesting.
I mean, it's still a possibility, especially James Gunn now gunning for DC. But the closest thing we've actually had to any kind of like live action Deathstroke so far, aside from obviously that brief cameo, is when you think of Marvel vs. DC, Deadpool is literally inspired by Deathstroke. So Deadpool is literally the closest in any kind of form we've actually had to Deathstroke. The only difference being that it's a different character who was inspired by Deathstroke. But I would love for that. Like, I would personally love, hopefully, that we get a film, whether it's, him as the main villain or if it's like his film himself. I feel like that is definitely something that a lot of people need to look forward to, especially with this kind of tone that the Dark Knight trilogy brought with it. That seems like it would really fit Deathstroke really well.
Yeah, definitely. And I think we could have seen a different type of movie. If it could have been a success, who knows? But I feel like there were different visions that they could have gone with. But I think as we start to draw towards the final segments, I think we'll jump into our quick take round. So I'll make a statement about the trilogy, and I'll get each of you to respond on each take. So let's start with the first take then. The Dark Knight trilogy is the definitive Batman on film. Michael, what's your thoughts on that?
Me? Yeah, for sure, the live action. TAS is still the Batman for me, no matter what. But it's so much more. It's so longer. There's so much more involved in it. As a live action, complete story, Batman, cohesive Batman story, absolutely.
Alex, do you have a response for that take?
I have similar beliefs there, actually. Yeah, animated series is definitely the highlight, especially the voice, obviously, because that's probably what most people would think when you think of Batman himself, both with how he dresses, how he speaks, and that. But yeah, the Dark Knight trilogy is probably, at least in terms of consecutive storytelling, it's the best Batman-esque media to watch if you want to enjoy something that spans across all these films that actually tells one overall story together. So I would say yes, but it doesn't necessarily mean it has to be the one everyone has to go for. But it would be something that if you had to introduce someone to Batman to, it would probably be the best one to try and get the better reaction out of someone to at least see how they handle so many different villains and concepts that build up the character that is Batman.
Yeah. And I do agree that everyone has their own opinion on who is the definitive Batman. But let's move on to the next take then. Christian Bale's Batman voice was a mistake. Joe, let's go for your thoughts there.
No, I liked it. I thought Christian Bale was the best Batman. And the voice he puts on, like with other Batmans, the voice to put on, you can kind of hear Bruce Wayne underneath it. Like with Michael Keaton's, he's not really putting on a different voice. You can still hear it's him. So people who know him but don't know he's Batman will be able to tell that that's him. Whereas with Christian Bale's, he's completely changed his voice to become more darker, more intimidating, threatening, and you want a clue it's him. So I liked it.
Yeah, I definitely feel it was a voice that's definitely led people into thinking of what the definitive Batman voice is, as this has become an iconic. Bale's voice for Batman has become an iconic piece. Next take then. The trilogy is better than individual films suggest. Alex, what do you think of that?
Well, I do like one long consecutive story together. Like, I do like where it's all tied together. It's not like you've got to piece it together yourself, where, like, say, with the cartoon episodes, how it's like one episode after the other, and you've kind of got to think, does this take place like 2 days later, a week later? Is it good consecutive storytelling, unless you know it's supposed to be, a bit in the past, or it's meant to be like, a bit unorganized a bit. But I would say consecutive storytelling in the trilogy over individual episodes, just for the sake of consistency.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that take. Let's go for Nolan's realism hurt Batman more than it helped. Michael.
Nolan hurt Batman more than it helped?
Nolan's realism.
No. He's, I think he did a good job. I think he did a fantastic job. I don't know that you get to tell a better Batman story once you've told that Joker story. Once you've had that, you've had a couple of Jokers that nobody's going to live up to. Jared Leto can't live up to the two Jokers before him. It just doesn't matter how weird you make him look. Doesn't matter if he really is a rock star. Just you can't. You live up to Jack playing it cool, smooth, not quite psychotic, and then Heath playing it quiet, smooth, and extremely psychotic. I think Nolan might have been he may have not been the Batman and director you wanted, but he was the Batman director we needed. There you go.
Oh yes, very true.
Yeah, I like that.
Yeah. Well, next point we have brought up here then is The Dark Knight Rises ending ruins the trilogy. Alex, your thoughts there?
I think you already know where I stand on that. No, I think it maybe it's not the perfect ending, because obviously it's too up in the open. It's too leave it to your own imagination for what could possibly follow up. But considering that it doesn't necessarily leave like any outstanding threats aside from the next potential people who could rise up, it kind of ties at least everything together. At least on the threat side for now, so it actually gives you that one moment of peace that the rest of the films don't actually give you at any time. But it does also lead to the potential that how you interpret the ending, meaning that this whole thing will continue just with another person donning the cowl, the next person to become the next vigilante that will hopefully do Batman solid and keep Gotham safe from whatever rises up next. So I gotta say, definitely does it as a solid end.
Yeah, it did really tie things up. Obviously, we've mentioned the mistakes they made, but yeah, I do agree that it does tie most things up. Even if there were some bits at the end that you were like, don't know if I would have done that. But yeah, for the overall, it was an end. And then next take we have then Heath Ledger's death inflated the Joker's legacy. So Joe, let's hear from you for that one.
To an extent, yes. Although I think people look at him more and respect him more as an actor after he died. But even then, I think, even if he hadn't died, I think he'd have been viewed as an unbelievable actor, best Joker there's been. And if you look at you compare some of his other performances to Dark Knight. Look at this scene, for example, when he's in A Knight's Tale.
Yeah.
And look at how he is there. You would not look at him and think he's going to become the Joker.
True.
So that's
Yeah,
just,
very
I think that's more testament to him as an actor.
Oh yeah.
Like, the fact that he feels so believable, you don't see. Like, I've seen other actors play villains, you just don't believe it. Jim Carrey, for an example. Whereas Heath Ledger, you wouldn't believe it at first, but the way he pulled it off was unbelievable. So I think regardless of whether or not, regardless of what happened to him, he'd have always had a great legacy after that film.
That's very true. I like what you mentioned there about Heath Ledger's other performances, like very different from the Joker portrayal he had here, and it really did show the range that Heath Ledger had, and that he was an iconic actor in and of himself. And I definitely feel that people started to respect Heath Ledger more after his death, but I feel like that happens with every great artist, that they are thought of more fondly, and people remember their bits more after they've gone than rather at the present time.
I think something that might be kind of funny to think about then when you think about, the actors who play the Joker. When you hear about the stuff Jared Leto has kind of done, why he's a bit of a, well, I don't want to say a weirdo, but let's say like a very contentious character himself.
Yeah.
When you think about him playing the Joker versus Heath Ledger, you've got like the sweet innocent boy versus the guy who literally belongs in an asylum. How has he actually played Joker the worst, at least by, people's rankings, when the person where you think, really, he's played the Joker, he's somehow one of, if not the best, who's actually brought into life. I mean, fair enough, it's the difference in writing and that as well, but I just find that kind of funny, where the guy who is more Joker than Joker is actually the worst, and the guy who's like an absolute angel is the best.
Yeah, that's very true.
I think that's just something to think about when you say that, though. At least, regarding the legacy of him and the Joker, just something like that, you might just end up just laughing to yourself, thinking, you know what, that's actually a good point.
Yeah, that is very true.
Do you think that anybody, in your opinion though, is there any actors around now who you think would make a great Joker? Like I mentioned, that guy who played Henry Creel. I think he'd make a good Joker, and so would Bill Skarsgård.
Willem Dafoe, Willem Dafoe has literally said himself, I think, he would play the Joker. He may be a bit on the older side of everyone who's ever really played the Joker, but when you think about the first live-action Joker we really had, I don't think that's, a bad idea. If anything, it's based on how we've seen him as, like, Norman Osborn, and even in, like, some of his other roles where he's played a bit of a villain. I think, if anything, he's overqualified. Like, I think Willem Dafoe's, like, slept on opportunity. Like, it's like Batman Beyond. Like, he could have been, like, an older-esque kind of Joker. Like, Batman's old, Joker's old. Like, that's the kind of Joker I can see him play. But, that's the only person I can think of, because you can't just cast anyone as the Joker. It's got to be someone who can actually live up to this legacy, which is why some people have the contentious decision, like, are they good? Are they bad? But I feel like that's definitely one character you don't want to get wrong. And that's why so many people have had such a bad reaction to Jared Leto, because he's not really Joker. He's like a crime boss trying to be the Joker.
Yeah,
I think Bill Skarsgård, just, after seeing him as Pennywise, I think seeing him Joker, I think he'd pull it off. And I think, like Henry Creel as well, when I saw him, I think it was just turned around, he pulled that face when he was in that asylum. It's that one face he pulled, I think he would make an amazing Joker.
Yeah. And I think that what Alex mentioned with Willem Dafoe, I agree that if Willem Dafoe played the Joker, he would probably be the most iconic one. Well, not the most iconic, but one of, because I think Willem Dafoe is definitely someone that people sleep on for that psychoticness that Joker portrays. But let's go on to the final hot take then. Burton's Batman influenced pop culture more than Nolan's. Michael, your thoughts on that, especially in the 80s?
Man, yeah, probably. I think so. I think that by the time you get to The Dark Knight, you expect The Dark Knight. So if you don't have The Dark Knight by the time you get to The Dark Knight, then the whole point of the original Batman, that Tim Burton Batman is missed. The whole point is missed because that's the popularizing the character that we know as a comic book character, but making him more human than anybody outside the comic books has seen. Obviously, if we're talking about Frank Miller and you're talking about Dark Knight Returns, you've already seen, 5 years before that or whatever it was, a different Dark Knight character. A real Dark Knight character, if you will. So I think the first Batman movie really that first Tim Burton Batman movie sets the stage for every, not just Batman movie, but every superhero movie to follow.
Very true. But I think that something that we need to address with that, I feel that modern retrospectives keep bringing up with the movies, is the undertones of the movies. So especially like with the political undertones, like the Patriot Act parallels. That I've seen people mention the Dark Knight cell phone surveillance echoing post 9/11 America, or Batman taking control to save Gotham through authoritarian means, or even just questions about fascism like Batman's philosophy on order and peace achieved through violence. And there are quite some undertones within these movies themselves. And I've seen quite some fans talking about this issue, and I think it's interesting to bring up here. So, Michael, let's start with your thoughts on these undertones.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing to see happen in the movies, to watch him to sort of build the technology and do the things that he does. There's a huge difference. It's really about the usage of it and the fact that he's not using it to force other people to do something, and I think that's the huge difference. Obvious, the correlation with the post 9/11 America and the NDA and all these things that have come along since then, Patriot Act, all that, is a moot point, because when you're talking about the force of government, you're talking about something that affects us all, and not just an individual in their world, or even a bunch of individuals in that world in that instance. Anything that government does, especially our central government, affects all of us, and we have no choice in the matter. We can't opt out of it in any way.
I think that's stuff that we're seeing more prevalent today than back then.
Well, first of all, if you go back and look at the Burton movies, there's nothing political in them.
No,
they're comic book movies. They're not, and there are comic books that have plenty, including plenty of Batman comic books, that have plenty of cultural reference and import, and they talk about the time period that they're created in, and they have a message to deliver. The Tim Burton Batman did not have that. that was not. We were supposed to be entertained by the characters and the story, and we were very much so.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's the main difference between having a comic book movie as a comic book movie, or having it realistically and adding realism into your movies like Nolan did.
Hyper-realism. Sure,
Yeah.
I think that's the better phrase, really. It's
Okay.
hyper realism because it's too. There wasn't anything unrealistic about the Burton Batman, aside from the stretching gun and things like
Yeah.
that. But there wasn't anything particularly unrealistic about it. It's the hyper realism. It's what you expect out of
Mm.
ultra terrorism and the being on edge and everybody in the other. You've mentioned it, that Joe and Alex have mentioned it a couple of times here. Just that feeling that's carried through the movies, and that you're all you're moving from one thing to the next, and there's almost no point where they're letting you down. That's such a different thing about movie making today,
Yeah.
where you're having, I think, to keep the attention of people, that their attention could be taken away by so many other things. In fact, with the Heath Ledger thing, I don't think that the death made the movie more popular. I think the death made it less popular. I think that there was more that could be done in the future, and if he had been there to promote the movie and be there with the movie, all those things afterward, that it would have been even better. It would have been a better universe. Who knows what could have come out of it, like we were discussing earlier. So.
Yeah, that is quite true. And I do like that term you use, the hyper realism, because you're right, like there are realistic things in the Tim Burton ones. As it is, there are stuff in the world that you'll see reflected. But then, like I said, the hyper realism, which Nolan brought in. Yeah, exactly. Alex, what's your thoughts on that? What's your process on Michael's take here?
I think it's actually a really good and strong take. But one thing that I'd probably add to that as well, when you think about, like, again, something I mentioned around near the start, the threats that you get in the Dark Knight trilogy, they kind of up the ante a lot from the Batman stuff that come before it. Because when you look at how everything's handled, there's still massive threats, but when you look at it more in like the political aspect of it, all the villains act much more like what most people would probably consider nowadays like actual acts of terrorism, like the blowing up of hospitals, buildings literally being swarmed by armed gunmen, which, as much as you really don't want to think, it still goes on nowadays, not just in like one country in particular, but like worldwide. And even if it's not, guns, it's knives, it's drugs, just the villains themselves, they really hype them up a lot more, where they don't just make them just a one note character. They actually make them someone that you would genuinely be afraid of, like Bane when he hijacks a plane and literally drops it like a sack in the middle of the air, or even where just Heath Ledger's Joker tries to convince the people and the criminals to blow each other's boats up. Just these kind of things will cause like nationwide panic. And when you see Gotham literally at the breaking point where all the bridges are destroyed, there's literal anarchy in the streets, there's no police in The Dark Knight Rises. This is like the kind of thing that a lot of our governments nowadays are more or less, I guess, seeing these kind of things leading to, where there are Batman villains that do want to bring around a kind of revolution. Like on the lower end of it, you could say anarchy. I mean, you still would probably have like bombs and that, or you'd still cause, like beating up certain individuals. The way the Dark Knight trilogy handles it, it makes it so much grittier, and it almost kind of captures the realism of what these actual attacks are when you think about ones that have actually made the world stand still. And I feel like that's kind of what really contextualizes and really makes the Dark Knight stand out, for the fact that its threats aren't just, comic book based, they're actual ones that could happen in reality. Like you could probably hear about another plane being shot down that had important figures on, and the Dark Knight just does it in its own way to show that these people are just as bad as the people in real life, where I guess it just makes it seem both real, but gives you that hope that Batman is basically just that feeling of hope that we all want, that, these kind of threats can be subdued in the right way, and even if we have the wrong people handling them, then, Batman, as the symbol of hope, he's able to stop them no matter what. Granted, not in the most clean and efficient way, but the way it's handled is just, it's just I just can't think of like the right words to put for it. It just feels like anything that most other Batman media wouldn't be able to get away with unless it was translated in video games or animation. So this definitely makes it stand out a whole lot more for the fact that it's something that I feel like everyone at one time or another can say they've witnessed something like in reality, and to see it handled in a film in a similar way just kind of gives it that extra bit of appraisal that the film truly does need, and actually really does signify how well grounded and realistic the film actually is. At least for how threats like these would actually be handled.
That is very true. And yeah, definitely quite some parallels to threats of today and what you'll see in the real world. But Joe, what's your thoughts there?
I agree with what Lot's saying. Like, I'm someone who thinks, politics should be kept away from superhero films. Like in most cases, I like the politics should be kept away in the sense that you shouldn't use them to try and force your views on others in a way, or promote some kind of ideology or anything. But in Dark Knight, I don't think they really do that. It's just more, like I said, realism. It's just something like this is like this. These sort of like it might seem unrealistic when you watch the film, but it's a lot more realistic than other Batman films and other superhero films. Like this could happen, even though it's unlikely. It could happen. Somebody out there could. This could be someone out there who is that dangerous and can cause that sort of threat. Like I said, with the whole aeroplane flying out the sky, or when they had that big car chase in Dark Knight, lorry on fire in the middle of the road, and then wires knocking down the helicopter. Things like that.
True.
I don't think we're going to get, particularly not in Manchester, a villain like Joker taking over.
No, not Manchester. I mean, maybe the odd druggie here and there, but definitely not a crime lord like that.
No.
But we met someone over.
Oh no.
Yeah, I guess we do have a bit of that craziness in the real world, I guess.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
I think what we should at least take away, at least from what we see in the Dark Knight, whether you focus too much on the political aspect of it or not, is that it's only hyped up like that because it engages a bigger reaction out the audience. Like, you would not see this much stuff on like the regular. Otherwise, I don't think any place would ever be truly safe or habitable. That's the whole point of Gotham. It's literally a city in complete chaos.
True. And I think to use the word you used earlier, a bit of anarchy there. But I think we've dissected the origins, the influences, the execution, and the aftermath of the trilogy. So let's go into the final verdicts then. Does the Dark Knight trilogy still hold up, or have we outgrown it? So Alex, let's start with you.
It still really does hold up for me. Like, even when I think of any other Batman media that comes after it, aside from, animated projects, let's just focus on the films. The Batman and anything to come from that in the future, I will say, is a good contender at least, especially with its slight different take on how it's handled. But compared to other things, like when you think of like the Ben Affleck era of Batman, like Batman v Superman, Justice League, I definitely would pick the Dark Knight trilogy over that kind of stuff, thinking that holds up a lot more than anything like that. So I would say yes, it definitely holds up even after all these years.
Michael, what's your thoughts on the Dark Knight trilogy, and if it still holds up?
It's not a superhero movie. It's a movie about a superhero. That's the trilogy, the entirety of the thing. It's not a comic book movie. It's a movie about a comic book character, and I think that's the line that was crossed with Nolan, as it took it out of the pages of the comic book and made it much more real, and successfully so. I'd be hard pressed to see anything better. The Batman was fine. It was a fine take on the Batman and the grittiness of the Riddler himself, just the very nature of that character himself and the way they portrayed him in that is something that will have to be discussed in the future if they ever complete the trilogy and if it all comes together nicely. Already, I doubt very seriously it can stand up to the Nolan trilogy because, first of all, it's not one vision. It's not going to be one vision. And that's going to be the hardest thing that you're going to come by. Nobody's going to sit around and wait for 3 movies anymore.
True. That's one of the biggest challenges of today is waiting, especially with all the delays. Joe, what's your final thoughts then?
Yeah, for me, it still lives up. For me, I think it's the greatest trilogy to ever exist. I think Dark Knight in particular is my favourite movie of all time. Not just Batman, but any superhero movie that matches Dark Knight scenes. Like I said, Infinity War and Endgame came close, and that was the peak of Marvel. But I still put Dark Knight over that. And other Batman films like Ben Affleck, not a bad cast choice, but it's poor writing. Brooke Patterson Batman, I liked it, but I didn't love it. But Dark Knight for me, I think it's going to be one of those films that's timeless.
Yeah.
I think for generations to come, people love that film. I feel like the Michael Keaton one set the standard, but Dark Knight raised the bar, and it's not been beaten. I don't think it ever will be.
True, and I agree with a lot of different takes here. Love the ideas and processes that you guys have laid out here, and I love that bit, Michael, where you mentioned that it's not a superhero movie, but a movie about a superhero. Mind blown. But I think here's my perspective on the Dark Knight trilogy, is that it's simultaneously one of the most important superhero film series ever made, but also one of the most limiting. Christopher Nolan did something revolutionary, yes. He made the world take Batman seriously, not just as entertainment, but as cinema worthy of critical analysis and awards consideration. The Dark Knight proved superhero films could explore morality, chaos versus order, and the nature of heroism without condescending to audiences, which I love here. But in grounding Batman so completely in realism, Nolan also created a template that became a straitjacket with that grittiness and that edginess, and for a decade, every superhero property tried to be that, and it really ruined a lot of movies during that 2010s era. And they mistook Nolan's atmospheric tone for automatic depth. And the realism that made the trilogy feel fresh in 2005 became exhausting by 2015, especially if we look at Batman vs Superman, or look at that weird Fantastic Four film that they made that we've touched on earlier, a podcast episode. Like that, not really, like that era is something that I wish I didn't have to witness, to say the truth. But the uncomfortable truth is that the Dark Knight trilogy might be both the best and worst thing that happened to Batman on film. Best, because it elevated the character to heights previously unimaginable. Worst, because it convinced studios that Batman only works one way. Grounded, realistic, and psychologically tormented. Burton gave us Batman as gothic fairy tale. The animated series gave us Batman as timeless mythology, and Nolan gave us Batman as contemporary parable. And now, with the new era of Batman, we have Pattinson giving us Batman as noir detective, so we're looking to the detective side of stuff. And I feel each era reflects what audiences needed Batman to be. The trilogy's politics make modern viewers uncomfortable, and its action choreography never matches dramatic ambitions. And I feel like Christian Bale's Batman voice, while iconic and really did work as Batman in my eyes, I feel it did become a meme. And the endings of both The Dark Knight and Rises still remain controversial, especially Dark Knight Rises, and we've mentioned it earlier, the bits of the trilogy of that ending of Dark Knight Rises, and the bits that it tied, but also the bits that left people confused. But I feel like none of the bad stuff we've mentioned that the movies came with erases what the trilogy accomplished. It proved comic book characters could carry complex adult storytelling. It demonstrated that practical effects and real-world grounding could create more impactful spectacle than CGI overload. And it gave us moments, like you guys mentioned, the hospital explosion, the Joe mentioned like the helicopter stuff, and you guys mentioned like with the boats exploding and all that hyper realism. And while yes, there are bits that went a bit overboard, also gave us moments, and bits like why so serious that are etched into pop culture forever. So I would say, is it overrated? Not too sure. Is The Dark Knight really the number 3 movie of all time? I mean, well, an amazing movie of all time is a bit of a stretch. But is the trilogy historically significant and generally great filmmaking? Yes. Alex, let's hear that.
Yeah, I'd like to actually put something in this podcast, something we've not done before. I think it might just be something that might do really well, considering how old Batman is as both a concept and the character of various different interpretations. I feel like I would, as him being one of my favorite superheroes of all time, having a very big impact on me ever since I was like 5 when I first was aware of him. I feel like I would not be doing him any kind of justice at all if I didn't take at least 1 minute just to say something that I would probably say is very emotional for me, that I would like to share with the world, if that's all right with you.
Sure.
There have been high points and there's been down points in Batman, like there's been in every superhero film and media ever. There's been the good, the bad, the ugly, the brave and the bold.
Mm-hmm.
There's been all sorts. Whether you're a fan of Adam West, whether you're a fan of the serial Batmans, whether you're a fan of Affleck, Patterson, or any of the other Batman that have ever existed, they've shaped a generation of superhero films and superhero lovers around, whether for the bad guys or the good guys, or the concepts that they embedded into society, and the love that they've generated in fandoms and all sorts for both cosplays and DIY creations.
Yeah.
Batman has shaped a lot of this for a lot of people, and to those that are no longer with us, they've cemented an amazing piece of history in cinema, gaming, and, well, just fandom in general. And to that, I have to say thank you.
Yes, I agree. Thank you so much for those. Let's give
Thank you.
a moment for
Tearing up a bit.
Alex.
Oh God, I'm crying on camera.
Good though.
I hope that's not dampened the mood or something, but I just felt like we've not done that for another podcast before. I felt like, since this is a very important one for me, I would have loved to just at least share my general thanks to every single person that's ever been involved in making Batman and everything around him so iconic, because we've lost a lot of people along the way, and whether they've been the best or the worst, they've contributed, and that's something that no one can sneer at.
Truly.
Yes.
Very true. But I just wanted to mention that, Alex, what you mentioned there really does add a lot, and it kind of adds to that legacy of Batman, because without all this that we've gone through, it's it's what brings about everyone together. It's what allows us to feel part of that universe of Batman, and to feel part of that iconic and unique legacy. But I'm gonna be crying again.
Oh great, what have I started? You know what? Everyone start crying on camera. We're in on this together.
Let it go.
Oh, if this doesn't somehow get us like a reward for this podcast alone, then it's been a massive missed opportunity.
Nah, it's just proof. It's proof of the power of 85 years of a whole bunch of people contributing to a modern mythology. It's amazing.
Very, very true. And I think with that, guys, and with Alex also all in tears, I think we'll wrap it up there. So thank you so much again, Alex and Joe. You guys always pleasure. And Michael, you've been an absolute star. Thank you for coming on to this podcast. And if you want to tell the fans listening in on where to follow your work.
Oh yeah, towardanarchy.com.
Towardanarchy.com.
Easy. It's where it, if you type Toward Anarchy in a search engine, it's me.
Awesome. So thank you so much again. Guys, this has been an amazing deep dive through 85 years of Batman history. From Detective Comics number 27 to the Dark Knight trilogy, Batman endures because he's malleable. It's what allows that legacy, and it's what allows everything that we've mentioned and the stuff that Alex has mentioned that's got us crying. It's what makes Batman. And whether you think Nolan's trilogy is a masterpiece or overrated says more about what you value in Batman than it does about the films themselves. And maybe that's the real legacy, keeping us arguing about who Batman should be for generations to come. So next time on Bullet Time Bites, I'll be diving into part 2 of the Batman Deep Dive. We'll talk about how stuff have been handled post Dark Knight trilogy and looking more into Pattinson's Batman's work. But until then, remember, it's not who you are underneath, it's what you do that defines you. So this is Dynamo, your guardian, wishing you all a great week and to keep it tight. Excelsior.